So you found your dream home. One thing has come up though. You've got... Hang on a sec. Poly-B piping. It's a bad word around here. So if you're looking for a property between the mid 80s and late 90s, you're bound to run into a few that have this type of plumbing. So in this video, I'm going to answer all the questions that are going to come up as you're working through this transaction. I'm going to talk about insurance implications, what to do if you have it, how to kind of remediate the issue, how to identify it, and the different types of setups based on risky to non-risky. So a quick disclaimer, I'm not a plumber, I'm not a home inspector, I'm a real estate agent here in Kelowna, BC. I've dealt with it on many number of transactions as well. In a previous lifetime, I was a heating air conditioning mechanic / boiler technician, so I've worked with it a little in the past. I'm just going to be drawing off my past experiences here. So what is Poly-B? Poly-B is flexible plastic piping that was used, introduced in the mid 80s, and it was used to replace what was previously used copper plumbing. So copper plumbing was super expensive to manufacture, and it took a long time to install. When this plastic piping was introduced, they also introduced it with crimp-on fittings. It cut down on the installation time by a lot, and it was super cheap to manufacture. So like I said, Poly-B was most commonly used between the mid 80s and late 1990s. So if you're looking for a home in this time frame, you're definitely going to want to have it on your checklist of things to look out for. And what's the big deal? I mean, you're here watching this video, so you gotta have an idea. The most common way for it to fail is the plastic would begin to erode from the inside out over time, and you'd get pinhole leaks, most commonly on the crimp connector joints, which would be, either a quick leak or a super slow leak over time. Either way, not good to have. And this type of piping would have a premature failure or a super short lifespan compared to other types of plumbing like copper or PEX. Let's talk about how to identify this stuff. Poly-B piping is colored gray, so that's going to be your first tip. If you've got gray piping, take a closer look at it. There's always going to be some sort of writing or stamps on the side of the pipe. Look for polybutylene or PB. If you've got either of those two things written on the side of the pipe, then you have Poly-B piping, unfortunately. Copper is super easy to identify, and PEX is easy as well. PEX is typically colored in red, blue, or white sometimes, and it's got brass fittings. So if you've got Poly-B, there's a couple of different ways that it was set up and installed back in the day. So we'll start with the most risky type, which was when they first introduced the piping. They were using plastic Poly-B piping with plastic couplings and connectors. The couplings and connectors were the most common failure point. These are where you hear all the horror stories, but they would fail from the inside out and you'd get pinhole leaks. Sometimes slow, sometimes fast. If it was a slow leak, it'd be leaking for a number of weeks or whatever, and before you know it, you've got mold everywhere. Either way, not good. So if you've got the plastic pipe and the plastic fittings, that is a major red flag. You definitely want to budget for a replacement cost on this item. Now the second setup is later in the years of using Poly-B, they became wise to this issue and they replaced the plastic fittings with copper. So if you've got the plastic pipe and the copper fittings, it's a less risky setup. Personally, if I had it in my house, I'd probably just be using it cautiously, but I wouldn't be all too concerned about getting it replaced right away. Now, some homes here in the Okanagan have in-floor heat or radiant heat systems. Now, this could be a whole another beast. If you've got an in-floor heat system, most of the time the pipe, if it's a hydronic system, that means that it uses water to heat the floors. Most of the time the pipe is actually embedded in the slab or concrete. So if you've got Poly-B that's running through the floors in your home in that fashion, replacement is probably not on the table because it just is not worth the money to go ahead and chip up the concrete just to replace the piping. Now, here's one thing that I've heard about in-floor heat and Poly-B is that the Poly-B material or whatever it's manufactured out of, when it's heated up to the temperatures that the in-floor heat uses, which is actually higher than the hot water that comes out of your tap, the poly material actually somehow absorbs air and injects it slowly into the water system, only when it's heated above and beyond the temperatures of normal hot water, right? So like I said, the in-floor heat runs at a higher temperature. When you get air into your hydronic system, it's going to run through your boiler, which if it was an older boiler, it's got a cast iron heat exchanger. Air, water, and that type of metal, you're going to get little chunks of rust, and when rust is floating around through the system, it doesn't matter what type of piping you have, you're going to develop leaks if you've got chunks of stuff circulating through that system all the time, right? So there's another thing to watch out for. If you got this, I would just be using it super cautiously. So eventually you're going to get to the point where it's time to get the property insured. Now, it is a common thing here in BC and all over Canada, so many of the insurance providers are familiar with Poly, how it works, and they might ask you some additional questions. And yeah, it's on paper a higher risk property in their eyes, so there's a chance that they could charge you a higher premium or deductible for the insurance policy, but you're probably not going to run into too many issues on the insurance side. It's not going to be a deal breaker for you. Now, remediating Poly B, it could go a number of different ways. I've seen quotes from $5,000 to $20,000 plus. It all depends on kind of the style of your house and the way the plumbing is set up. Obviously, number of bathrooms or water consuming appliances and kitchens is going to come into play because that's where the water runs to. If you've got a crawl space, that's a super simple job because everything's accessible under the floor for the most part, right? So that's going to be, a super inexpensive fix. But as soon as you start tearing up drywall, and depending on the amount of bathrooms and kitchens you have, things could add up quickly. So I hope that helps and gives you guys some clarity as you work through this little problem that you're going through. And if you don't want to miss out on any of our content, make sure you like and subscribe, and we'd love to work with you. So if you've got any other questions about this stuff or anything else real estate, give us a call. I would love to chat. And until then, guys, we'll see you on the next one.